Hi, Linda. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. We're just
Alrighty.
waiting for additional folks to hop on to the Zoom. And then just in a couple minutes, we'll get started.
Great.
And I think we're also waiting for Tom as well. So
Yep, let me ping him real quick.
hello, everyone. For those of you who are coming onto the chat, welcome, welcome, welcome to a virtual conversation with YUSA on the global legacy of the Y. So we're just waiting for additional folks to hop on to the Zoom, and we'll get started in just a second.
Hi, Yolanda. How are you?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you.
Fantastic.
How is Denver today?
Denver is quite hot, I think. Yes, Denver's quite hot. So we're just waiting for additional folks to hop onto the chat, and then we'll get started in just a few seconds.
Great.
Alrighty. Okay, fantastic. So let's just get started. First and foremost, I just want to thank each of you for hopping onto this call, a virtual conversation with YUSA about the global legacy of the YMCA and how the Denver Y has been part of that global legacy. I just want to mention that this event is happening as part of our welcoming week at the Denver Y, as well as YMCA's across the country, is really an attempt at creating a space where we celebrate the diversity of cultures within our YMCA's, highlight the experiences of those who identify as immigrants, as refugees, asylees, and create a space where we can really have honest conversations about how we're all connected, right, as people, in spite of our culture, background, and differences. And so today we have two, I would say, megastars at YUSA in terms of the global work that the Y is doing. And I just want to kick us off with some introductions, and just read off their bios. If I gave them that opportunity, they'd truncate it, they'd say a few things, but I really want you guys to know of the amazing work that both Tom and Trang have been up to at YUSA, and how they've been a part of this work pretty much their entire careers. And so we're just going to start off with Tom here. So Tom Valentine is vice president of the international group of YMCA of the USA. Tom leads YUSA efforts to strengthen collaboration between the US and the global YMCA movements with a presence in 120 countries. This includes efforts to strengthen US YMCA global partnerships, the coordination of financial and technical support for international YMCA partners, the organization of global youth-led solution summits, and the mobilization of philanthropic support for global YMCA youth and community initiatives, aimed at advancing progress toward the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Tom joined the international group of YMCA of the USA in 1996. Tom has over 30 years of international development experience in Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. He has extensive experience leading and or managing collaboration with a wide range of YMCA partners, including the United Nations, United States Agency for International Development, AmeriCorps Vista, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, the Knight Foundation, Margaret Cargill Philanthropies, Delta Airlines, Viacom. I could go on and on and on. Tom has been amazing in his partnership abilities for YUSA. And really began, prior to coming to the YMCA, began a lot of his journey working for the Catholic Relief Services in Ethiopia, Egypt, Kenya, Uganda, and Burundi. Tom holds a master's degree in international development from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University and a bachelor's degree in American Studies at Georgetown University. Tom also speaks French, Spanish, Amharic, Arabic, and Swahili. And so we're going to now introduce Trang Truong Hill. And I just want to say Trang has been such a support of the Denver Y in really standing up our work around equity and diversity, but more specifically, our international engagement. So Trang has worked in the nonprofit sector for over 17 years. Her nonprofit career started with the YMCA of Greater Long Beach in California, where she worked with the immigrant youth and families in after-school programming. In 2013, following 8 years with the YMCA of Long Beach, Trang joined the YMCA of USA as the Director of Newcomer Engagement and Global Services. Trang leads and coordinates efforts to strengthen the capacity of local Ys to work with newcomer immigrant communities and successfully impact diverse communities. She provides national strategic oversight of the growing network of YMCA New American Welcome Centers, the YMCA's participation in National Welcoming Week, and external partnerships. Trang also serves as a national steering committee member for the YMCA's Asian and Pacific Islander Employee Resource Group. Trang has a passion for youth development and supporting Asian American Pacific Islander leaders and communities. During her free time, Trang is a community organizer and is part of the co-founding team of Celebrate Argyle, a community initiative that aims to shine a spotlight on immigrant-owned restaurants, businesses, and the rich diversity of Chicago's AAPI communities on Asia on Argyle. So some fantastic bios here of these two powerhouses at YUSA. We're all in for a fantastic treat. And so we're going to hear from Tom and Trang really about the global movement of the YMCA. Many folks don't know because we're such a locally focused organization oftentimes that we have a global reach. And so we're going to hear from them about what that reach actually is and how the Denver Y has been connected. And then we're going to take a step back and I'm going to ask Trang and Tom a few questions I think that we all are wondering as local leaders. And then we're going to open up for Q&A. So if there are questions that are coming up for you as Tom and Trang are speaking, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom to type in those questions. We'll be monitoring them and then asking our guest speakers to respond toward the end of the call. So with that, I want to pass it over to Tom and Trang to lead our conversation moving forward.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. We're really grateful for the opportunity to speak with everybody today. And we also just want to begin by saying how much we love the Denver YMCA. It's a YMCA with a really rich global history and connection to many of our incredible global events in the past. And it's also a wonderful, increasingly global city. And so we're really Grateful for the wonderful work that you lead on a day-to-day basis to advance equity and social inclusion in your own city, in your own region, and also grateful for what you do to support us with our global YMCA efforts. And so Trang and I are going to kind of tag team today. I'm going to start by giving a little bit of an overview of our global YMCA movement and our history, and weave in a little bit how Denver has been linked to that. And then we're going to go to a much deeper dive around Welcoming Week and what we're doing to support newcomers and immigrants in the United States, which you're also very much a part of, that Trang will lead. So Trang, if you would be so kind, can you bring up the presentation? There we go. And we'll get started. So, this is a map of the global YMCA movement. We have a presence, including the United States, in 120 countries around the world. And collectively, we reach over 50 million youth and families around the world every year. So we have an enormous impact and legacy that stems over 179 years. It's incredible. Each YMCA around the world is led by indigenous local leadership. And so, whether it's in Liberia or Colombia or Vietnam, those YMCAs are run by the leaders of their country. And we as the US are just one of 120 of those national movements. So we're a global federation connected together. What's really exciting is that even though we are very diverse in terms of the community needs we serve, in terms of the socio-political context that we operate in, the size of our YMCAs or the age of our YMCAs, the one thing that really unites our movement is a common commitment to empower young people to lead change. And that's really the one cross-cutting theme across all YMCAs around the world. And in Aarhus, Denmark, in July of 2022, we held the World Council of YMCAs, which gathers all of the YMCAs from around the world to elect our new lay leadership, but also to determine our strategic directions for the future. And for the first time, we adopted a long-term strategic vision called Vision 2030 to really better articulate the impact that we make as a global YMCA movement on youth and youth leadership, and what we do to contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to eradicate poverty. And in Vision 2030, we identified 4 key pillars and themes where we want to concentrate and expand our efforts over the next 8 years. Those are the development of a sustainable planet, meaningful work for young people, community health and well-being, including mental health for young people, and a just world, which is everything that we want to do in anti-racism, newcomer and immigrant inclusion, LGBTQ inclusion, and social inclusion more broadly. So these are the 4 cornerstones of the work that we're doing globally. And it's exciting right now because while we've always done great work to address inequity in the YMCA movement, we've never had a larger overarching strategy that guides us all in the same direction. And we in the US movement are very deeply involved in a lot of that work. One way that we support the global YMCA movement is through our annual World Service campaign. And your YMCA and many YMCAs around the country, many individuals and retirees and other partners contribute to the World Service campaign to strengthen the leadership, the programs, and the sustainability strategies of our global YMCA movement. And that raises over $3 million a year. It makes a huge impact. In addition to that, we have more than 200 Y2Y partnerships and coalitions where local YMCAs are part of a deeper partnership with YMCAs around the world, again, for mutual learning to better address equity and social justice issues in our country and around the world. And so there are many vibrant partnerships and coalitions that exist. Trang, is the leader of the Philippines coalition with many local YMCAs throughout the country. And in history, Denver has been a big part of the Nicaragua coalition and also connected to the Border Initiative coalition, which is many of the YMCAs in the United States working with the YMCA of Mexico along the border to help migrant youth. And so Denver has a rich history of being engaged in both World Service and these partnerships. Interestingly, in 2014, the United States movement hosted the World Council of YMCAs. It was hosted at YMCA of the Rockies in Estes Park, just a few hours away from you. And the Denver YMCA played an enormous role in helping to host people before, during, and after the conference. And it was really instrumental in helping us have what is remembered today as one of the most unifying and exciting World Councils in the history of the YMCA movement. So we are very grateful for all of Denver's leadership in the global arena, and really impressed by your commitment to this work. In addition to these efforts, we also have some philanthropic partnerships and grants. We're currently working, for example, with the American Express Foundation to advance meaningful work opportunities in Colombia and Spain. We're working with the Peanuts Foundation on helping to advance camp inclusion in different countries around the world. So we have a lot of different activities that we're involved in as our US YMCA movement seeks to better advance Vision 2030 and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The last thing I'd say as a bridge to Trang and to Welcoming Week is the YMCA is an organization since its founding that has always helped migrants and internally displaced and refugees. We spread across the United States as a result of refugees, and you're going to hear more about that from Trang and migrants who came to our country. But around the world today, immigrant inclusion is extremely important in the work that we do. And so Welcoming Week for us is really critical because it's a vital area of social justice and dignity for the migrants that are living around the world. And it's a really critical way that the YMCA serves people, youth and families in so many countries around the world. I just wanted to bring up 3 quick examples outside of our borders, and then Trang is going to talk about what we do here in the United States. One is the country of Lebanon in the Middle East. Lebanon actually hosts more refugees per capita than any other country in the world. There's over 3 million refugees from Syria and Iraq, from the West Bank and the occupied territories in Palestine. It's one of the most difficult countries in the world, because literally 1 out of every 4 people living in the country today are refugees. But they do incredible programs with the distribution of medical supplies, the organization of vocational training, helping young people get access to camp and to school, and do an amazing job supporting refugees where it's very uncertain if and when they'll ever return to their home countries. In addition to that, the YMCA is playing a lead role through YMCA Europe in the Ukraine humanitarian response. And as we speak, we are working with hundreds of thousands of internally displaced Ukrainian youth and families in Ukraine who are displaced by the war. And then we are working again with hundreds of thousands who are outside the borders of Ukraine in countries like Romania and Slovakia and Poland and Spain and Germany, where they are integrating Ukrainian refugees into the schools, into their camps, into their vocational training and job placement programs. We're playing a lead role in the humanitarian crisis, and we've raised millions of dollars so far, and it's a crisis which is still unresolved. So we don't know what's going to happen next. But the YMCA continues to play a vital role in supporting the humanitarian needs. But in addition to that, when the war ends, we're going to stay. We're going to be there to rebuild the YMCAs, to rebuild the camps and youth centers, and help build bridges of peace and cooperation in the region again. That's what we do best. And we have an incredible track record of that, as you can see through the spread of the YMCA movement around the world. And then lastly, I just wanted to lift up the incredible work at the Mexico border. Thousands of young children under the age of 18 are deported every year, unaccompanied. And the YMCA of Mexico runs the Casas Migrantes, which are the border homes for migrant youth, which welcome the young people once they come into the community, feed them, shelter them, clothe them, take care of their psychosocial support needs, and then eventually help them reunify with their families. That's particularly important for those who are of Mexican origin, but we also have many that are from Central America or Haiti or Africa or Afghanistan or different places around the world, and the YMCA helps them until they can reunify with their families. So it's a great impact. It's a great legacy that's been active for over 3 decades, and a critical example of how the YMCA is making a difference in the lives of the most vulnerable. So that's a quick overview of the global YMCA movement. Again, thank you for Denver's support, because you've been journeying with us for many years in all of this, and we'd love to talk with you more about opportunities to get engaged in new efforts as we look to the future. So with that, let me hand it over to my good friend Trang, who's going to talk a little bit more about all of our work here with newcomer immigrants in the U.S.
For sure. Thank you so much, Tom. So thank you again all for being here today. I do see some familiar names in the participant box. So a shout out to Joe, Debbie, Sue. I see y'all in the chat box. So just know I see y'all. I just want to first off start off by saying how this work is so near and dear to my heart. My parents are actually refugees from Southeast Asia and came to this country in the early 80s. And I literally witnessed first counts of how my parents struggled coming into this country, and but the good faith of other organizations and agencies, they were able to be resettled and build a new home and new life in this country. So I'm forever grateful for the resettlement agencies that really helped to support my parents. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for efforts like the refugee resettlement agencies that supported my parents. So as we think about our work within the Y, like Tom alluded to, work with immigrants is not new to the Y. And I hope that everyone knows essentially the origin story of the Y, right? You know, George Williams, 18-year-old, was like, there is a need, because there are this influx of young men coming from the English countryside into the industrialized London. He saw a need and responded. And essentially, throughout the turn of the 19th century, the YMCA played an active role in supporting these men that needed a place to belong, a place to just be able to connect with others. And as the first YMCA to the United States, the Boston YMCA welcomed arriving Europeans. So something that I want to just point out, and I'm going to put a plug in, if you are not familiar with the YMCA archive, these are actually snapshots of the artifacts essentially that the YMCA archives at the University of Minnesota holds of the history of the YMCA. When I had a chance to visit the archives, I was actually touching these different place cards that were passed out on these steamliners that were coming from Europe to the United States, and essentially saying, do you need, do you need to learn English? Do you need a place to shower? Do you want to make new friends? It was just so surreal to be touching history, right, in the late 1800s, and it was just incredible to see the impact of that. Other things that you may or may not already know, like the Y had a presence on Ellis and Angel Island, offering new immigrants information on the YMCA, from housing to employment to language education. And again, this is something that you'll want to add to your YMCA trivia. The YMCA was the first organization to offer English as second language classes in Cincinnati, Ohio, to German immigrants. Decades later, during the Vietnam War, like I mentioned earlier, my parents were part of that wave that came to the United States as a arrival of Southeast Asian refugees. So the Houston YMCA played a critical role, and that's how the YMCA International Services was formed, because of the influx of Southeast Asian refugees coming into that area. But as you know, in terms of our timeline in history, between the 1980s and early 2000, work with new immigrants among the U.S. kind of dropped sharply. And, certainly YMCA's had a lot of newcomer immigrant communities taking part in after-school programming camps, youth sports, and aquatics programs. But the focus, so customized work on new Americans, was, again, went into a little lull. But until recently, in 2016, we were able to, oh, sorry, this is not it, to really, what we collectively pull together what we call the New American Welcome Center model and effort. So in 2016, we launched the New American Welcome Center project as a transformational model that YMCAs could adopt. So it provided a framework for YMCAs to organize their programs and services for newcomer immigrants, to provide those wraparound services. and really look at creating a hub, whether that's virtually or in person, to support our newest neighbors to navigate the different systems within the United States. And in 2019, Denver actually joined the pilot cohort to be part of the New American Welcome Center efforts. And recently, Yolanda and her team and I have been connecting as we think through how does the New American Welcome Center work look like now. As we recover from the pandemic, a lot of shifts had happened, a lot of transition and changes. So what I've been seeing in the movement across the different New American Welcome Center sites, we have 18 YMCA associations part of this, is really looking at how do we look at our resources, can we be more effective at how we serve our communities and partnerships, and just ensuring that we're not duplicating efforts. So we're seeing a lot of Ys taking the time to pause and to reflect and look ahead in terms of how can this work be re-energized in terms of the current context of community. So, oh, sorry. Oh my goodness. So here's a snapshot of a few photos of the New American Welcome Center work. This is obviously pre-pandemic, but it's been just a tremendous experience being part of this effort. We want to give recognition to YMCA of Greater New York. They were the first YMCA that really took the time to understand what is the needs in the immigrant community and created a model that we were able to adopt through this cohort of YMCA as part of this initiative, to be able to scale something that is easily adoptable, but also at the same time giving the intentionality of how we serve our immigrant communities. So as we think about our broader commitment to our work, but this is part of us as an organization, right? When we think about a mission for all, again, I think this is not new news for folks, but I just want to take the moment to recognize when we think about our mission as an organization, the Y is made up of people from all backgrounds working together to strengthen community. Together, we work to ensure that everyone just has the opportunity to reach their full potential with dignity. We share the core values of caring, honesty, respect, responsibility that guide everything that we do. So when I think about the work in supporting our immigrant refugee communities, but also our general equity work, our diversity, inclusion, and global work, we need to ground ourselves in ensuring that we are serving for all. And how does that look like? How does that show up in our, our youth development programs, in our aquatic, in our membership, in our community outreach, and just ensuring that we're reaching all those that want to be part of the YMCA. So when I think about the equity journey and where we are, granted, as I shared some of those tidbits of history with you all, this is still a work in progress for us at YUSA. You know, it was, I want to say, Tom, please chime in the early 2000s is when YUSA really took the intentional time and effort to really reflect on our own equity journey. What does that mean to be for all? And that's where the birth of DIG and global DEI, in terms of understanding how do we analyze our processes, but also really look at some of the things that have done harm to community, and how do we unlearn that? How do we ensure that we are moving forward and reflecting on that as well too, as we think about power, privilege, access, inclusion, being an anti-racist, multicultural organization. What does that look like as we think through the different dimensions of diversity of how we serve our communities as well? So when you think about Welcoming Week and where this work sits, each of us all have a role in advancing equity for all. And it takes staff at all levels representing our business functions, working in cooperation, and really looking at the internal capacity of our building efforts to strengthen the Y and in the community as well too. So here you'll see community bridge building is a way that we really look at this work in terms of our equity work, but also Welcoming Week, right? Welcoming Week is a community bridge building effort to really bring communities together, longstanding, receiving communities with our newest neighbors into our community. So how do we look at bridging across differences and really working across divides and just ensuring that we have a voice of unity, but also just being able to lift the uniquenesses that each community group holds. So with that said, I want to leave the group with this quote: together we can create a more welcoming nation where everyone can belong. So I hope that what Tom and I shared today resonated with you all, but that is essentially our very high level cliff notes, like teaser version of what is typically a session that we normally do with long periods of time, but I know this is something that we wanted to quickly just highlight, and we can maybe open it up for conversation or questions.
Thank you so much to you, Tom and Trang, for giving us that overview, right? And so just to sort of reset on who's on the call today. So I realized I didn't even introduce myself. So I'm Minister Yolanda Richard. I'm currently the Vice President of Community Impact at the Denver Metro Y, leading on DEI implementation in our impact work and narrative. And yes, as Tom and Trang mentioned, we organize this conversation to really, open up our staff and open up our community, really to the history of the YMCA. Right, we're a very local organization in a lot of ways, but we do have a global reach, and so the hope here is that the teaser, right, is really a huge eye opener, right, and how we're connected to folks all around the world. And so I want to invite those who are on the call to submit questions in the chat, right? We have access to Tom and Trang here for at least another 30 minutes. We have them. So if there are questions that you have for them about their role, about their careers, how they got to where they are, about the Denver Y Global, anything, you can drop that in the chat. And as we're waiting for folks to drop their questions in the chat, we'll just kick off with a couple of questions that we've pre-prepared here. So as I mentioned before, many YMCAs around the country are very local. And a lot of our work happens in wellness centers with fitness, youth development, camp. And a lot of folks on this call, right, find themselves in those wellness centers, right, behind a desk, managing equipment. Help us to sort of connect those folks that are in our wellness centers on the ground in community to what's happening on the global level. How can we sort of connect with what you all are doing at YUSA?
Thanks. I'm trying, if you want, I'll jump in, and I want to have you also share some of your thoughts and ideas. First of all, within our leadership development, so our learning and leadership development system, we actually have one of the certifications that staff and YMCAs can pursue is a global leader certification. So we do have a wide variety of training courses that are available around our global work, also linked to all the work that we do in DEI as well. So everything from implicit bias, cultural lenses, understanding the global YMCA movement. There's a range of opportunities that are available that staff, even if you're just getting started in the YMCA in your career, you can start to learn more and connect through that. And that's a great mechanism. It's very easy. It's very cost effective to begin. In addition to that, we have some more advanced level cohorts that many of our young leaders are a part of. So those include the Emerging Global Leaders Initiative, which is it's usually about a 8-month cohort. Right now we have 25 young leaders under the age of 35 from around the United States. They go through a lot of our foundational diversity, equity, and inclusion training courses and global training courses. But they also have an opportunity to come together as a cohort. This year, they spent time in Chicago, which was really cool. And then later in the year, they will all be part of the America's Youth Summit, which is a summit that's being organized between Canada, the United States, and Latin America and the Caribbean. It will take place in Bogota, which is one of our incredible YMCAs around the world. And they'll be there with 100 other young leaders from our 3 regions in the Americas, talking about Vision 2030 and social justice issues, where YMCAs are leading global change. And then in addition to that, there's all the things that you can do that connects to the global movement through Welcoming Week. I mean, Welcoming Week's one of the most important events, and that's really important. The whole world is watching our welcoming week, because as we welcome newcomers and embrace that, that also influences many other parts of the world, especially those countries where we have a lot of immigrants. And so it means a lot to them to see our commitment and solidarity. In addition to that, there's a whole range of World YMCA virtual and in-person youth initiatives that you can connect to at it's www.ymca.int, which is the World YMCA website. But there's, for example, the Youth-Led Solutions initiatives, where young people are leading climate change action in their communities through an initiative that the World YMY USA partner on together. So there's a range of activities. If you look at Link or you connect with any of us, we can try to help steer you into some of those specific opportunities. What else would you add, Trang?
Yeah, I would just underscore what Tom mentioned around all the things that he mentioned are all on YMCA Link. And if you are not already on Link, please maybe I know it's sometimes hard to get on Link, but once a week, 10 minutes, just log on, see what's going on in the YMCA world. Or if you're an avid social media user, you can follow us, myself, Tom, on LinkedIn. We usually post a lot of things on LinkedIn, as well as Facebook as well too. We have a global YMCA Instagram handle for those that use Instagram. We tend to post or repost other content from our global partners. So if you want to get connected, I would say for sure, first things first is YMCA Linked. What is it called? Join the diversity inclusion global community on YMCA Link, and then follow us on LinkedIn. You can add us, we can connect with you, and you can sort of see the updates and things that are happening. But yeah, I think if you are intentional to want to connect and learn, the floodgates will open.
Absolutely. And I can testify to that. As soon as I added the dig function to my Link account, the whole world opened up. And I was like, oh, all this has been developed and created. So this is fantastic. So there's actually a question in the chat from Debbie, and we'll go ahead and answer this live. But Debbie brings up a really good question about supporting World Service as a volunteer, right? So she says, when looking at the needs of World Service, how do you prioritize the need? And that she continues to support Nicaragua as one of Denver's partners. So can you speak to, if you're not a staff person, you're not on payroll at the Y, how can you plug in if you're a volunteer?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I mean, the support for World Service is huge, and all the countries that receive support from World Service, and it's usually over 30 to 40 every year, have great need. I mean, the need exceeds what we're able to raise. So they continue to make a difference. I mean, we do sometimes organize special campaigns when there's a particularly huge humanitarian challenge, and we've done that in the past with Haiti, with Ukraine, in Ethiopia. Sometimes things are so big that we really need a special appeal. The tsunami that took place years ago, we've had some really big special appeals. But it could be through support to your Y2Y partner. Denver has its wonderful history with Nicaragua, but it could also be to the overall campaign that goes to the other countries that we allocate, or to another specific partner that has great need. So there's lots of ways that you can contribute. When it comes to international Y2Y partnerships and exchanges, we're strong believers that they're the most effective when you have a good balance of volunteers and staff leading the work together. And in the strongest enduring partnerships that we have, and some of them are more than 3 or 4 decades old, it's really the volunteers and the board members that kept things going over time. We've got some wonderful examples of that. So volunteer engagement at all levels is super important, both from a strategy perspective as well as getting things done. It's really important that we, as much as possible, try to engage our broad network of volunteers in our global work when possible. You have some wonderful volunteers with Joe and Debbie and others in Denver that are well known by all of us. but all of that work really makes a difference.
Fantastic. So we have a question from Amanda, Scott's press singer. What do you perceive as the greatest challenge in this work currently in a post-COVID environment? Do you perceive the challenges globally as different from the challenges WISE may be experiencing locally? It's a good question.
Interesting. It's a big question. I'm going to try to answer it based on what I've learned from young leaders. And that is, when we did surveys of young leaders at YMCA 175, which was the 175th anniversary event that took place in London, England. We had over 4,000 young leaders from almost 100 countries in London, as well as World Economic Forum surveys. The number one thing on the minds of young people today is the greatest existential threat is climate change. And we see all around the world climate injustice disproportionately impacts communities of color, communities of poverty in our country and around the world. It's a hard reality. We've got YMCAs in many parts of the world that are immediately impacted by climate change and in their operating environments and their agriculture and their economy. And so, young people really want to make a difference in this area. And so later this year, we actually have a group of US YMCA leaders who learned from the World Council in Denmark about what other countries are doing. And we want to look at how do we reduce our own carbon footprint? How do we help get more young people into the outdoors? Equity in the outdoors is a huge topic. What could we do to use our influence to advocate for better policies and practices? So, I think that's something that's we're still trying. We have so much potential. We have this enormous grassroots game in the United States and around the world that we can activate, but we still could be a bigger force for good. And young people, frankly, are challenging us to say, hey, step up. Where are you? The YMCA needs to lead more.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we have another question here from Joe. Tom and Trang, have you noticed any changes in how the WISE participate, how the US WISE participate in the international movement since COVID?
Another good question. Two things I want to say is it's amazing how much our YMCAs stayed engaged even during COVID, and how much solidarity and support they continued to provide, even though they were facing enormous challenges themselves. And we want to recognize and thank all of the local WISE like Denver who did that. For those who had deeper relationships and connections, it didn't change that much at all. I think what's happening right now is, I don't know if it's COVID or it's just a new generation of new YMCA leaders coming in as times change. I am seeing YMCA leaders with a stronger worldview, that maybe it's because they are from an immigrant family or they've worked globally before, but I'm finding that we don't have to make the case for global as much anymore. They understand, like, hey, this is who we are and something we should do, which is to me very encouraging. That's not true everywhere, but I'm hopeful with the generations of leaders of YMCA people that are coming in now, that they're going to do even more. And I think they really have a strong worldview, and that gives me optimism for the future.
Trang, do you have a thought here as well?
I think what I've seen is, specifically with my work with the Philippines Coalition and with the National Asian Pacific Islander Leadership Employee Resource Group, we've seen an increase in wanting to get more involved and connect with our partners in Asia as we think about sort of what the pandemic did around the anti-Asian hate and all these sort of issues that are facing the Asian Pacific Islander communities. There's been, I think, again, a tremendous increase in staff and volunteers wanting to be more involved to do more. And how do we continue to connect the dots with our work here locally, but also globally, recognizing that some of the similar issues are also happening with our global partners.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to continue to invite folks to drop questions in the chat, but I think the questions that have been answered so far are really um, sort of illuminating, right? What I hear coming back is that we have sort of increased interest around the global work, right? And thinking about uh, the history of the why, where the why is today. There's increased interest in the global work, but what I'm finding most interesting is Trang's presentation that talked about the Y really beginning as an organization that supported folks from other countries, right? That really stepped in to provide ESL classes, support, safe space, right, for those who were coming into the US. And I'm just curious there about where within our when did the YMCA sort of step back from its origins, right? Where did that disconnect happen? Because I can tell you, and most of the folks on this call can tell you that the idea of the YMCA being a global movement is a new idea for many of us. And so, can you guys speak to um, where did we make that pivot historically, and how do we get back to our roots in being that global movement?
I'm gonna kick it to you first, Tom.
Thanks, Trang. It, a lot of it happened when I first came to the Y around that time in the 80s and 90s. I think the Y was really pivoting so deeply to community health and wellness and, a membership orientation when we used to be much more community outreach focused. That became the bigger priority around in understanding and sustaining our operations. And one of my YMCA mentors had a great quote about governance earlier this week that he shared with me, and that was that one of the challenges with our leadership and our boards at times is we focus on sustaining the organization and not the mission. And the real mission of the Y is a lot of outreach work and community development work and community partnerships. And so, but I've seen a big change in that over the years, which gives me a lot of hope. And even just, I remember when Welcoming Week first started, it was a handful of Ys. Now it's half the country, and we're in all the states, and it's incredible. And I think we're getting more back into that grassroots, not just being a membership only focused organization, but an organization that helps convene and collaborate with others to advance community change. And with that, that's where I think we're kind of rediscovering our past. What else would you add to that, Trang?
Yeah, I can speak to the second part of your question, Yolanda, of like, how do we get back to that? It's our young people. I think about, again, 18-year-old George Williams is like, oh, this is all happening around me. Let me do something. So I feel like we need to get out of the way of our young people, give them the voice, give them the space to really like lead that next sort of iteration of what the Y will be for the next 175 years. I mean, we had that convening in London, England for the 175 anniversary. And, I don't know if folks have heard that we established the first National Youth Advisory Council from the national office. So we have, I don't know how many, I forget how many, but we now have the first ever National Youth Advisory Council that has a direct connection to our national board. So I think that's a huge win. And I think as we think about essentially reclaiming that history, it's our young people around the world and the United States. So I think that is what is promising and inspiring for me to help kind of like not lead the way, but like make the path and let me get out of the way. I'm not young anymore.
No, but what you all are saying is it's just so inspiring, right? And the YMCA, right? We're a youth development organization, right? We do camp and we run programs, right, surrounding youth. But I think sometimes we struggle, right, to connect the dots between caring for youth and empowering youth to be world changers, game changers. systemic change warriors, right? And so I guess that's the follow-up question to this, right? Um, if the why on a global level recognizes, hey, we have, maybe we can call this a bit of mission drift, and we've sort of stepped away from seeing ourselves as a community based organizer, an organization. And we know that youth is the solution to that, right? Pouring into youth is the solution to that. How do we transition from camp to campaigning? How do we transition from holding a youth program to empowering youth to see themselves as leaders? What would you recommend to the Denver Y and perhaps other YMCAs that might get a hold of this recording? What would you recommend to us?
That's an awesome question. You know, first of all, I think to have some critical reflection internally around, are we an organization that provides services to young people, or are we a platform that gives young people the opportunity to lead change? Because that's how we started. And some of the best work that we do, it's because young people, I'm thinking about youth-led solutions right now, come up with incredible ideas and make a difference and make a change. And so it becomes with some of that understanding of who we are. It's also critical, as Trang mentioned, like with youth councils or youth voice and youth leadership, to make sure that in influential places and spaces, young people are at the table, they can speak up, they can speak out, there's a voice. And then the third thing is, and we learned this from World Council, and this is even a practice that we're going to utilize in the America's Youth Summit in Bogota this year in November, is intentional intergenerational dialogue. And it's not really an either or. We're not trying to, eliminate senior leadership or older leadership's role, because they have a critical role to play, but to build a deeper partnership that's more authentic, which begins with senior leaders and older leaders like myself listening better, and more intentionally passing on leadership opportunities, but then also just how do you strategically plan things together to create that change. So I see hope for it. I do see a lot of progress. And again, I'm encouraged by young people today, because I feel like they're very confident, they're very clear about what they want to change, and it's really our role to give them that mandate to do it. What else would you add, Trang?
Yeah, for me, what I went to as thinking about what you asked, Yolanda, is exposure. I think about when we think about global learning and infusing sort of the education and the awareness at an early age. Don't wait until folks are in high school or when they're done with school. We know that early learning in general is great for children to develop the skills that they need. But as we think about our commitment to equity and our global work, like our global leadership work, we can start as early as when they are in, preschool, or want to talk about our global movement and things, how we cook food here is, different from over here, or different holidays, or, just how do we have that exposure to other cultures and learning about our YMCA movement. Hopefully folks in Denver, you receive that beautiful, world service map that talks about the different countries and different stories, and you scan the QR code and you hear those stories. Like how amazing would that be if we were able to infuse that early on throughout all of our programs, from camp to aquatics, to understand sort of like the counterpart in the different countries that we are in the YMCA. So I think to your point, Yolanda, is really having folks understand the full scope of our mission and the impact that we have. And we are such a tremendously unique organization that has so much history, right? 179 now, 180, I lose count. But it's a very long, a very old institution, but I think we've been so great at continuing to evolve and really make way for the next generation to really lead.
Yeah, thank you so much to you both for responding to that question. I'm going to ask an even harder question, and then I'm going to pivot back to the chat and see the comments that have been coming through and just speak them out loud. Um, but to those of us that um, are wondering, well, I want to be committed to this work in a different way. But how do we make revenue? How do we sustain this organization simply by doing good around the world and in community? Help us to connect the dots between, right, this coming back to our foundation um, and the responsibility of an organization to sort of stay upright. Um, and I think a really good way to maybe enter into answering this is, are there other organizations, other YMCAs that you can think of that are doing this work really, really well that we at the Denver Y can be learning from?
That's a great question. And, and we're not asking folks to abandon their membership or their good operational activities and their fees for service. I mean, we know there's a role for that and it's important. But I do think the more that we become community outreach, whether that's in our own community or with global community, it does bring in a lot of new philanthropic partners. You may connect to individuals in your YMCA that have global roots. We see already in the chat how many of you are globally connected. Many companies and foundations, we're for the first time working with several foundations and companies that want to support stuff in the US, but want to partner with us because we also have a global impact and they want to make a difference in Colombia or in Korea or in a different part of the world. So, I mean, there's opportunities with that. It brings in new resources and new thinking and elevates the visibility of the Y as a key partner that's globally connected. There are many YMCAs like San Francisco and Long Beach, and I know those are bigger communities in some places, but that are doing this really well. YMCA of the North, and that have a broad base of partners and individuals in the YMCA that are involved, and it really makes an impact. Anything you'd add, Trang?
Yeah, I think I can share an anecdote from one of the New American Welcome Centers. I think it was YMCA Greater Charlotte when they were scaling it to other parts of their community in more of a rural area, and the executive director there was able to really foster a partnership with a local textile company because that local textile company had a lot of immigrant employees who needed support services for their spouse and family. So a new partnership was birthed in terms of how can the Y step into support with some of those enrichment activities for the family or provide English classes. And so I think if the commitment and the intentional effort behind supporting community is strong and you build that trust within the community in itself, I think to Tom's point, the resources and these different philanthropic opportunities will emerge. So how do we tell our story in a way that is compelling, but at the same time, we are ensuring that we're walking our walk, right? When we're saying we're for community, and that if there are parts of our work that may have done harm in the past, how are we on that road to rectifying that and sort of going through the healing to ensure that we can build that trust again with community?
Absolutely. Well, we just have about 3 minutes left in our conversation. And so I want to use that time just to say thank you. Thank you to you both for spending time with the Denver Metro Y, for the ways that you've committed to this work, committed your life to this work. And we just want to say thank you for that and to offer a blessing to you, that you might continue in strength and in wisdom, and that the work that you do at the Y will expand well beyond anything that we're doing here today. And so thank you, both Tom and Trang, for being with us today.
Thank you all for your leadership and thank you for what you do. And we look forward to doing more together.
Yes, yes. Just a quick announcement. So please, we are hosting a Human Flow screening, the documentary Human Flow. tomorrow, September 8th at 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And so if you haven't already RSVP'd or registered for that, please do go over to the Denver Metro Y webpage, type in Welcoming Week, and you'll find all of the information there to register for that screening tomorrow at 10 a.m. So thank you for your participation in this call. And please continue to join us for the remainder of Welcoming Week. Take care.